honor, Mrs. Deborah Thomas Felix, President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago, and guest of honor today. His Honor, Mr. Herbert Sovereign, Vice President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Keston Nanku, Chairman, Employers Consultative Association, and other members of the board of the ECA, specially invited guests and members of the ECA present in the room and all those viewing online, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you all. I am Stephanie Fingal, as introduced, and I'll just be hosting the ceremony this morning. I listened to our national anthem, and in it we talk about islands of the Blue Caribbean Sea, and I thought of your book, Your Honor. It is Commonwealth, the island around the islands, and not just Trinidad and Tobago. We warmly welcome you and thank you for joining us at the Employers Consultative Association for the launch of the book, Labor Law in the Commonwealth Caribbean, The Practice of Good Industrial Relations in the 21st Century, authored by Her Honor Mrs. Deborah Thomas Felix, President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, this is the second launch of what we will soon realize is an important publication, a publication that we anticipate will contribute to the strengthening of our industrial relations system across the English-speaking Caribbean. The ECA, as a nationally recognized body representing the interests of employers in local, regional, and international social and labor policy matters, we are extremely pleased to be associated with this milestone development and extend our congratulations to you, Your Honor. So in moving on with the objective of today's event, the launch of Her Honor's book, I now invite to the podium Mr. Keston Nanku, our chairman, to deliver opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. This is such an important occasion, and I'm indeed proud to have all of you here. And in addition, those who are streaming at this launch. As chairman of the Employers Consultative Association, please allow me to warmly welcome each of you to this book launch. Due to COVID-19 protocols, while we need to ensure that our numbers are in keeping with the protocols, I can assure you that your physical presence here this morning is immensely appreciated and valued. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all those who are listening via social media. The ECA is indeed extremely proud and views this occasion as a tremendous opportunity to be asked to host the launch of this book, The Labor Law in the Commonwealth's Caribbean, The Practice of Good Industrial Relations in the 21st Century, authored by Her Honor Deborah Thomas Felix, President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago. Having had a few moments to peruse the book this morning, I am sure you will agree with me that this book is one that is full of substance, having been written at a time when the world is experiencing probably the worst pandemic in more than a century. Permit me to just, as I continue the conversation with you this morning, to create the context so that at the end as we come to the end, you will be able to make the connection as to why this text is so significant and timely. So I'm going to share with you some of the issues and challenges that this COVID-19 pandemic has brought. Prior to January 2020, the world began to witness rapid changes in the world of work, primarily due to the introduction of various forms of artificial intelligence and other forms of technological advancements. This occurrence was being described as the fourth industrial revolution. COVID-19 has not only fast-tracked the arrival of the future of work, but in many ways has turned the world of work upside down. We can point to the tangible impacts on jobs, livelihoods, and the well-being of workers and their families. Measures necessary to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 have also caused major disruptions to enterprises, economies, and societies. To state the rather obvious, the world is not what it was. And more importantly, it is never going to be what it was, as I was sharing with Ian a few minutes ago, because a lot of people genuinely believe, you hear them saying, when we get back, after we get the vaccination, when we get back. Regardless of our opinions on this situation, as I've just described, the fact is the terrain has shifted. While the impact of these developments will vary considerably among countries, we in Trinidad and Tobago have also had to deal with significantly reduced revenues from the energy sector, further inhibiting our ability to respond with the breadth and depth of interventions required to ensure that all of us can survive this perfect storm. Having scanned the global environment and based on our realities here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have identified some of the key labor issues and challenges being faced because of COVID-19 pandemic in the world of work and the threats posed to the future of work. Let me now share with you some of those issues and challenges that we have to grapple with here in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean. The structure and organization of the workplace, as well as how work is delivered, has changed significantly. Remote work, flexibility and adaptability, part-time work, and even reduced hours is now the order of the day. In this regard, friends, some employers are required to rethink their entire business model to be able to survive and thrive in a post-COVID society. In the same way, workers, as well as employers, are now required to invest in retooling and retraining to develop new competencies and improve one's relevance and resilience. As we are aware, continued digital transformation will mean that jobs will be lost, even as new ones are created. The way we manage performance will have to change. Employers are now forced to modify their employee management strategies for the remote environment. For example, a shift in focus to output versus hours of work and physical presence at the workplace must be considered. Other issues include the impact to occupational safety and health, collective bargaining, the management and use of leave provisions, the impact to work-life balance and mental health, and the growing importance of social dialogue at both the organizational and national levels. It cannot be overemphasized, therefore, that social dialogue is a vital tool for ensuring effective coordination and cooperation in developing responses to the crisis and policies for recovery at all levels in our society. In addition, social dialogue also contributes to the overall cohesion of societies and is crucial for a well-functioning and productive economy. On the social side, we have the impact to the informal economy and other marginalized workers. Data from the ILO suggests that informal workers who already work without sufficient work rights and social protection suffered a 60% decline in earnings in the first few months of the crisis alone. Women are heavily employed in critical critically affected areas, such as tourism. And young people are also growing risk. More than 4 in 10 young persons employed in the hard-hit sectors. This combined with disruptions to education and training places this important demographic at further risk. Finally, small and medium enterprises, the engine of growth for many economies, including Trinidad and Tobago, are suffering immensely, and many may not even recover. This will also affect workers and their families. Quite naturally, all the new features brought about by the changes in the world of work will give rise to a litany of associated industrial relations and human resource management issues, many of which are common, but there will be others that are novel and emerging. It's fluid. It's fluid. It is therefore in this regard, at least from the ECA's perspective, we consider this book not only timely, but essential to assisting with navigating not only existing workplace issues and challenges, but more specifically in the current environment in which tripartite partners will now have to operate. You see, friends, lots of books claim to provide strategies and solutions to human capital issues and challenges. And though some do, they tend to be highly academic or abstract. This book is unique in that it was informed by a long and illustrious career in practice and written by one of the finest minds on these subjects in this jurisdiction. It offers a hands-on practical guide to help you make better and more informed choices. It is therefore with a great deal of respect and admiration that I highly recommend this text to business owners as well as both new and established practitioners of law, industrial relations, and human resource management. Your Honor, my dear sister, in closing, the ECA congratulates and salutes you on this notable achievement, and we wish you enduring success as you continue to represent this beautiful twin island with excellence, professionalism, and distinction. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Nanku, for putting some context and giving us an idea of the value of this new text written by Her Honor. We now invite to the podium His Honor, Mr. Herbert Soverell, Vice President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago, and long-standing colleague of Her Honor, Mrs. Deborah Thomas Felix. Please come.
Her Honor, Ms. Deborah Thomas Felix, President of Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago, and guest of honor today. Mr. Kester Nanku, Chairman, Employers Consultative Association, and other members of the board of the ECA. Ian, I understand he represents Mr. Henry, Dr. Andrew Vincent Henry, Director, Supreme Labor College and Corporate Studies. Specially invited guests and members of the ECA, those in the room and watching online, ladies and gentlemen. When I was invited to speak at this book launch, I felt and still feel honored and privileged for this opportunity to say a few words at this particular launching of Her Honor, Ms. Deborah Thomas Felix. No doubt, this can be gleaned from my remarks which I'm about to deliver. Unlike the chairman who delved pretty deep into the world of industrial relations, I'm afraid I would not be digging that deep. I will stick to the author and I will stick to the book itself. But to start, however, I would like to refer to a quote from one Eleanor Smith, She was the first American female test pilot, and she had a lot of firsts in aviation. She said, "It had long since come to my attention that people of accomplishment really sat down and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things." My interest in this particular quote is the very last sentence. They went out and happened to things. Like Madam President, she happened to be the first in everything that she did, as far as aviation was concerned. Madam President, without going into details, you have been the first in the fields of law in many areas therein. As a result, they have both walked the common paths of firsts. At this point, I have to say congratulations to Madam President on her accomplishment of self-publishing a textbook on this particular aspect of law. Being personally involved in this particular law, that's IR, I fully appreciate the time, energy, effort expended by Her Honor. In this achievement, I knew when she started it and when she finished it. I don't think it took more than a few months, if so, if so many. This is an example of that last sentence that I liked. They went out and happened to things. In other words, they didn't wait for things to happen. They made things happen. A term that could be regarded as being proactive, but in her case, it's a bit more than that. As a result, I am indeed happy and indeed pleased with an accomplishment of such quality and in such a short space of time. Since I've had the opportunity or the chance to peruse the book, at its very least, this was a momentous and stupendous exercise. But I dare say it was indeed expected, knowing that I know the person I call Madam President. Ordinarily, in order to realize this achievement, there has to be some inducement, incentive, or possible stimulus. But what I observe in this case, those reasons were not necessary or needed. In this instance, as a matter of fact, they happen to be non-existent and not applicable whatsoever as far as this author is concerned. It is a fact that Madam President does not need any such reasons. All she has, as far as I can observe, is her ideas and quite clearly belief in herself, not to talk about energy and determination. Having said that, I conclude as far as honor is concerned. I now turn to the book. In my view, the contents, like the President's, what he said, are quite relevant to today's jurisprudence and environment, since it addresses topics, very topical topics, which regularly and frequently gravitate to the court for hearing and determination. That makes it germane and relevant in this particular environment. There can be no doubt that topics such as management prerogative, retrenchment, layoff, and dismissal, to name a few, are important and relevant. Those of us here who are familiar with the IRA, Industrial Relations Act, will know the policy of its long title, which states in part, an act to make better provision for the stabilization, improvement, and promotion of industrial relations. Considering those subject areas addressed in the book, it is undisputed that it is meant to realize and did realize that policy. It is said that no man's an island, and as such, the author quite rightfully, in my view, including pertinent foreign authorities within the Commonwealth, which to me is an indication that we live in a global world and all the knowledge does not reside in any one place. The book explains the genesis of the industrial court at its first chapter. That to me was a very smart move. In other words, you know the basis and the history and the rationale behind the industrial court. Madam President, well done for that structuring. Thereafter, it provided a deep, compelling, and accurate insight into the nuances relating to the stated subject areas. The contents of this book has both a curative and preventative function. That's to borrow a phrase from the medical field. It achieves those two objectives without doubt. I highly recommend the use of its contents to practitioners. At this stage, permit me to echo a view expressed by the Honorable Chief Justice in his speech at the launching of this book at the Cipriani Labour College last Saturday. I'm only paraphrasing him. He said that this book represents volume 1. I too rest my case as far as that is concerned. In closing, I wish to say, for this book, Your Honor, many thanks. For practitioners and the interested parties, this is a must-read book. Thanks for a job well done, and now on to volume 2.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savral, for your giving us an insight into the motivation behind the honors writing of this book. It is well received and applauded. We now welcome to the podium Dr. Ian Daniel he is, let me get it correct, Head of Department of Labor Studies at the Cipriani College, Labor College, and he's going to speak on behalf of Dr. Andre Vincent Henry this morning. Thank you. Please come.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Her Honor, Mrs. Deborah Thomas Felix, President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago. His Honor, Mr. Herbert Sovrel, Vice President of the Industrial Court. Mr. Keston Nanku, my very good friend and Chairman of the ECA. All other members of the board of the ECA, invited guests, audience, both live and remote, good morning. I am happy to be here today to bring greetings on behalf of my director of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, Dr. Andre Vincent Henry, who could not be here today. I know he is very disappointed about that. I won't go into any of the details of the text since that's been done so well, but I will say that the publication of this text, Labor Law in the Commonwealth Caribbean, is important in two very distinctive ways. One is that it feels like it's been a long time since we've had the last significant academic publication on Caribbean life and professional practice. There's a thriving kind of small research and consultancy field that goes on, of course. But the regional shaping, the world-leading social science kinds of publications that I grew up with, that you grew up with, Eric Williams, Best and Levitt, Lewis, Beckford, Walcott, Girvan, these seem to have been largely behind us for a little while now, which was, it's been a little bit debilitating to me because, when I was at the university, what we were doing was actually shaping academia around the world, And so what you're seeing now is that there's still some publications coming out, but not quite as weighty, not quite as shaping as before. And it's interesting that the majority of publications that are coming out today are female authored, That's very interesting to me. Coming from a female-headed family, you know, I feel like that's my kind of legacy as well. And the second way that this text is important is that in these days of global pandemics, you know, and as Keston pointed out, there is not going to be a post this reality. This is the reality. We will be wearing superhero masks, you know, and face masks for a long time. In these days of social seclusion, of unending recession, of precarious economic conditions that affect both worker and employer, what we have is a definitive analysis of industrial jurisprudence that is not only timely, it is absolutely necessary. We at Cipriani see this text as a necessary foundation on which we can build sustainable national and regional development that is premised on equity, fairness, and social justice. And these are not things that are limited to one side or the other. These are necessary conditions for all. It is important, especially in an island economy, and whether we like to think about it or not, Trinidad and Tobago are small islands. The only big island in the world, as far as I know, is Australia. You know, so in a small island economy such as ours, it is essential that stakeholders operate with a shared understanding of the playfield, and not in the context of alternative facts, fake news, and unrelenting partisanship, where we just can't seem to cross the divide at all. You know, and we see this, if you're like me these days, I try to wean myself off every 6 months, but if you're an MSNBC junkie, then you're seeing it. And the reality is that there's very little difference when you shift the focus to Trinidad and Tobago. We're acting in almost mirrored images of what we're seeing going on in the United States. There are simply things that just have to be shared in our realities. Sustainable economic and social development are chief amongst these. Worker issues are employer issues. Employer issues are national issues. And quite frankly, we are all in this COVID reality together. And if I can take just a moment to express some personal views, for me, Her Honor Deborah Thomas Felix, and I can't look at her while I say this, she's a diva. Okay? Not in the temperamental, self-importance, contemporary language usage sense, but more in the rock star sense, in the unusually glamorous and successful female personality sense. The classical meaning of the term, opera aside. I mean, this term was meant for you, Madam President. Your resume demonstrates this. Your long list of international accomplishments demonstrates this. The famous Felixisms delivered from the bench. I will not give you my list of the greats. But I will say that it also is part of the universal fear that my ex-students who now practice in the industrial court express every time they come away from the room that she is sitting on the bench. So, you know, diva is applicable. And so, in conclusion, I'd like to say that the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, we wish to congratulate Her Honor once again on what we believe is a seminal achievement that will redound to the benefit of the nation and the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel, for reminding us of who we are as a people and the importance of this book to us all as stakeholders, all responsible for the sustainability of our nation of Trinidad and Tobago. I now would like to invite to the podium our esteemed guest of honor, author of our book, President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago, Her Honor, Mrs. Deborah Thomas Felix. But may I Your Honor, may I be given 2 moments, please? Thank you. We have heard for the morning quite a bit about her Honor and her achievements and so, but not all of us in the room would be fully aware of all that she has achieved. And we'd like to share with everyone some more details about her achievements over the period to understand where this book is coming from, her motivation and her, what I call, consistency in the years before. Mrs. Deborah Thomas Felix is known and admired locally, regionally, and internationally for her wealth of knowledge and experience as a judicial officer and court administrator. In 1990, after practicing as an attorney at law, Mrs. Thomas Felix became the youngest person in Trinidad and Tobago to be elevated to the bench as magistrate, and within 4 short years, she attained the position of senior magistrate. In 1995, she made a career shift to assist the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the structuring and establishment of the Family Court of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, of which she became president. This court was the first family court to be established in the OECS. In 2001, after a period of acting as chief magistrate, Mrs. Thomas Felix attained the additional distinction of being the first woman to ever hold the position of Deputy Chief Magistrate in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2003, she was elevated to the position of member of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago and served in that position for 6 years. In 2009, Mrs. Thomas Felix became the first woman and 3rd person to be appointed chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission. After 2 years of serving as chairman, Mrs. Thomas Felix was appointed president of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. She became the first female to be appointed in that position and now serves as the 6th president of the Industrial Court. In December 2014, Mrs. Thomas Felix was appointed a judge of the United Nations Appeals Tribunal, UNAT, and became the first Caribbean national to be appointed to that position. In 2015, she was elected 2nd vice president, and in June 2016 became the 8th president of the United Nations Appeals Tribunal. In 2015, she was also appointed by the governing body of the International Labour Organization, the ILO, as a member of the Committee of Experts on the Application of Conventions and Recommendations, a committee comprised of 20 of the world's most eminent legal luminaries who are responsible for monitoring the application of international labor standards. She became the first Trinidad and Tobago national to be appointed as a member of the committee. On March 1st, 2020, Mrs. Thomas Felix was appointed a member of the International Monetary Fund Administrative Tribunal, an independent judicial forum for the resolution of employment disputes arising between the International Monetary Fund and its staff members. Like the United Nations Appeal Tribunal, she became the first Caribbean national to be appointed to that position. Mrs. Thomas Felix is an attorney at law who holds a Bachelor of Laws degree, a Certificate of Legal Education, a Master's of Laws degree in International Legal Studies, and an Executive Master's in Business Administration. She is also certified in international arbitration in oil and gas cases, mediation, and conciliation. Apart from her mayoral award for national service from the Port of Spain City Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, Mrs. Thomas Felix is among 70 of the most distinguished alumni in the region to be awarded for outstanding leadership by the University of the West Indies. That is our guest of honor. 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning to all. Those who are viewing virtually and those who are physically here. So I got up this morning, putting some thoughts together as to what to say, and heralded my secretary to type while I was speaking on the phone, so I hope it is what you expect. I did intend today to have a book reading and not necessarily give a speech. So the name of the book is Labor Law in the Commonwealth, Caribbean, the Practice of Good Industrial Relations. This book is a legal text with the use of 176 cases, and it addresses issues on labor law and industrial relations. The subject area, as His Honor, Mr. Sovereign alluded to, they are management prerogative, fixed-term contracts, layoff, retrenchment, dismissal, reinstatement, and labor-only contracts, which is called labor supply contracts. The main focus of the book, and my main reason for writing the book, is to provide clarity and guidance on the principles and practice of good industrial relations and on the importance of international labor standards in the world of work. Currently, there is a global crisis, as the chairman alluded to. This, together with the global economic challenges, because the world is experiencing severe economic challenges, but I think COVID-19 has overshadowed that. Those economic challenges and the world crisis have placed the spotlight on the world of work, the spectrum of vulnerabilities, and the intersectionality. As a matter of fact, I had a discussion with the media, and I said that there is this spectrum of vulnerabilities, and it is something that we will all have to look at to see the vulnerabilities in the various sectors in the world of work, see those who are disabled, those who are women, those who are displaced by whatever is taking place, but I'm not here to speak about that today, but it's very important that we look at the intersectionality of those things with the world of work. So that's not part of my written speech. It is important in these times for us to encourage and foster industrial peace, social dialogue, and cooperation among the social partners. For those of you who heard my speech at the opening of the law term, you will remember that that is what I said is the only way through social dialogue, particularly at the tripartite level, that we get out of this in a way that, when the chairman spoke about being upside down, that we get out of it without being upside down. It's very important for governments to hear what the employers, the workers, and the unions are saying. It's very important for the employers to share and sit and talk about their experiences with the unions. And it's very important for the unions to express what is taking place with their workers so that all in the room can hear, and through social dialogue, through consultation, through listening, come up with solutions. There is no way, like Ian rightly said, that the world is going to be coming back normal. This is a new normal and this is a new reality. The question is, how do we embrace the new reality as we go forward? And the best tool we have is social dialogue. With social dialogue and the application of international labor standard, we may shape things in the world of work different from what we even perceive them to be. And what we shape and mold because of consensus through social dialogue will become very useful going forward and assist us to develop, especially in the Caribbean, as developing states. So that's what I have to say on that whole issue. I'm going to read part of the foreword so you can understand what the publication is about. And then I'll read something on layoff because I know layoff is a big issue. The ECA wrote to me last September on issues affecting employers. I have not forgotten. As a matter of fact, I addressed some of them in the opening of the law term. I am very mindful that this is a very difficult time for both employers and workers, and it's a very difficult time for families. And we cannot forget in terms of vulnerabilities, the women who are working in the houses and teaching their children at the same time. It is very important as a nation that we look around sectors and the spectrum to see those who are vulnerable and see those who we can help and assist in these times. Okay, so in the foreword, it says that this publication deals with subjects which are inherently germane to industrial relations. The foreword was written by Dr. Ana Romero. I think some of you will know Ana Teresa Romero, who was the former director of the ILO for this region. This publication deals with issues that are inherently germane in industrial relations. They are also critical for developing public policies to address the labor-related aspects of national development agendas, as well as the labor market impacts of current and future crises that may emerge from various sources. This publication comprehensively explores the history, principles, and applications of international labor standards in different subject areas, and it analyzes national laws from sovereign states, Antigua, Barbuda. I have looked at 10 entire judgments from the Industrial Court of Antigua, Barbuda. The Bahamas, I did a comparative analysis with the law in the Bahamas as it relates to dismissal. And that comparative analysis, I looked at the Bahamas, the laws of England, and the laws of Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to dismissal. Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and the UK. As I said, one of the cases, I move from her forward, is a case which is the second case ever reported at the Industrial Court in 1965 by Chief Justice, then President of the Court, Sir Isaac Hayatali. And so I'll move to layoff, which I think most of you are interested in. And I will read a short excerpt, and this is my writing now. The first one was the writing of the foreword. The global economic recession, together with the COVID-19 pandemic, have had a profound effect in the world of work and have triggered mass unprecedented layoffs worldwide as companies move to downsize their workforces. The unprecedented global reach and the impact of the pandemic, with its attendant economic devastation and damage to the labor market, appear to be deep and long-lasting. There are reports of permanent job losses and what have been described as a global shock as the world grapples with the long-lasting implication of fundamental changes in the world of work. The ILO, in its report in the last quarter of 2020, reported, and I quote, "The devastating losses in work hours caused by the COVID-19 pandemic have brought a massive drop of labor income for workers around the world. Global labor income is estimated to have declined by 10.7% or $3.5 trillion in the first 3 quarters of 2020 compared with the same period in 2019. This figure excludes the income support provided through government measures. The biggest drop was in the lower middle income countries, where labor income losses reached 15.1%, with the Americas, which is our region, the hardest hit region at 12.1%, unquote. And these are my words, and I said it at the opening at the last launch, and I'm going to repeat it. There is a temptation sometimes to put international labor standards aside and treat them as not important in times of crisis. It will do good to remember that the principles of fairness, equity, and national justice are principles on which the foundation of our societies were built and which have assisted in stabilizing our economies and our countries over time. This is a time more than ever where the adherence to proper labor standards assume even greater importance to minimize instability in the future and to safeguard the interests of all in the world of work. In Trinidad and Tobago, layoff is not defined or provided for in any statute, and many companies do not have policies which guide the procedure to be followed when a layoff is contemplated. Before the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, that is the RSBA, before it came into effect, layoff clauses were prominent in collective agreements. Since 1985, after the proclamation of the RSBA, there appears to be a shift in focus in collective bargaining, and what has emerged is the inclusion of clauses in collective agreements which address retrenchment and redundancy, and less emphasis is placed on including clauses which provide for layoff in collective agreements. As a result, layoff clauses are no longer prominent features in many collective agreements. As stated before, the COVID-19 pandemic has created immense socioeconomic hardship. This is particularly so among low-income families. The global unemployment in 2021 is high, and many businesses have resorted to layoff as a stopgap measure to assist in their financial woes. Just one more paragraph. When mass layoff is contemplated, as we are currently witnessing in this pandemic, it may be useful for companies to consider other strategies before resorting to layoff. Where possible, parties, meaning unions, management, workers, may consider the reduction of the hours of work across the board in order to spread the economic consequence of cost reduction among all workers instead of among a few. In this way, all workers can bear the burden of the reduction of work hours together. This and other approaches to cost reduction, such as identifying and eliminating wasteful practices, can only be achieved with genuine consultation, social dialogue, among the social partners. It is also important, when layoff is contemplated, to ensure that the process which is adopted is not in violation with the provision of existing collective agreements or with the terms of an existing contract of employment. I'll pause here, only to say that I then went on to look at provisions in legislation outside of Trinidad for layoff, and that would have been Barbados, which amended its act last year as a result of COVID to have temporary relief for persons who were affected by layoff. Jamaica, Guyana, those were the other pieces of legislation I looked at in layoff. I thank you for your support. I thank the ECA for having me and the board of the ECA for having me here today. I am very heartened by the support and the request generally in the public for the book, and hopefully I provide good guidance. I must say to you, in layoff, I did 2 layoff clauses as samples, which I said are not prescriptive, but you can use those clauses, tinker with them, maybe come up with your own layoff policy or your own layoff clause, because at the end of the day, we just want everyone to understand what are the practices of good industrial relations and how do we work towards building, retooling, everything, rethinking, retooling, reinvigorating, and re-energizing our economies in the Caribbean and in the global context as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Honor, for reminding us of the vulnerabilities of our people. And as employers, I can assure you, it's of great concern to many of us as to how we address what we have as an unusual and, as we say, unprecedented situation from an economic point of view. Layoff I'm sure most people will be anxious to get that book to look at the layoff, a piece on layoff. And as the ECA, we stand ready to support you in further understanding this particular situation. So we are at the offices of the ECA and in the company of our ECA membership, live here and online as well. And we cannot conclude today's proceedings, Your Honor, without hearing from one of our community of business owners who continues to value the work of the ECA, appreciate the work of the court, the industrial relations requirements for employers. And so we ask this morning for Dr. Derek Smith, Managing Director of Sussin Business Solutions, a proud client and ardent proponent of the work of the ECA. Please come and give your remarks.
Pleasant morning to the President of the Industrial Court, Mrs. Thomas Felix, His Honor, Mr. Sovrel, the Chairman of the Employers Consultative Association, all members of the board, distinguished guests, both in person and also online. Pleasant morning. In listening to all of the discourse that was shared, one thing remains clear. It's that we are looking at the element of change. We talk about the inversion of the division of labor, the way in which power is being used throughout the organizations towards generating control and business continuity. And that's where that layoff comes into play, where the employer, in exercising his or her right to maintain a structure that could create a pause that would allow for them to rethink before they move to a more permanent solution where they have to sever ties with one of the most valuable resources that any organization could acquire. But when you look at the history, I want to take our minds back to something referred to as the big S waves, which Nikolai Kondratiev made mention of. These waves, they tend to take form of either 40 or 60-year cycles. So if you're playing an attentive role within the ecology, you'll be able to predict. You'll be better prepared. When 2008 came upon us, which was by no surprise, because we follow the normal process, time rolls on. Everybody was shocked with the fallout, and recovery was on everybody's lips. How do we return to a state of normalcy, or some semblance thereof, that will reflect a philosophy underpinned by business as usual as defined by the powers to be? When we move into the socioeconomic / medical arena where the biological elements come into play, a pandemic, not just affecting the lifespan of individuals, but it's also affecting business institutions. We now see that the last time we had an episode such as this was over 100 years ago. What did we learn from that? Possibly very little. And here again, the narrative becomes real. What do we do to restore a sense of normalcy, that it could be business as usual? But in Trinidad, we have a saying, we have what is called 10 days memory. CPEP type mentality, some people say. But if it's one thing that helps any economy to recover, it's innovation. When you look at innovation, the model that most people use is a tripartite model, similar to what Her Honor made mention of, but just with different elements. It's a triple helix model that takes into account the involvement of government, the involvement of academia, and the involvement of the business community, the institutions. So there's a degree of congruence that occurs when these three exist as one. But now we are disrupting that model of innovation because now we are looking at a quadruple or probably a 5-part. Introducing other stakeholders into the mix now to restore that point of competitive advantage that will lend to business continuity post-COVID-19. So civil society is coming into play. You'll also find other support institutions like the Employers Consultative Association will come into play as well. So how is it that we'll navigate, especially in these unprecedented times? So I want to add with a quotation from a guy by the name of Dr. Edward de Bono. And here's what he said. When you look at a mistake is considered a well-justified event. Yeah. That under circumstances that are beyond your control gave rise to no success. When you're navigating unprecedented territory, you're going to make mistakes. Employers are not going to engage in acts of premeditation associated with disrupting the lives of their most valuable asset. No employer sets out to make their employees' lives difficult. They set out with good intentions. After all, the business models are wrong, providing for a need in society, right? But mistakes are going to be made simply because there is a void, which we call ignorance. People just don't know what to do in these times. So you know what they will rely upon? Their own experience. Or they might rely on intuition. But you know, intuition, you can't cash a check with that, right? So where do we look for solid content that will keep you out from trouble? Where do we turn before it's too late? So we go back to that triple helix model: government, academia, and industry. But when you have a disruptor like COVID that made government rethink its whole policy framework, they were silent in the beginning. The ECA was the voice that came out like the harbinger, crying out in the wilderness, "Prepare ye straight the way," because this is how you should navigate COVID today. And employers will fall into a predicament where they will end up making mistakes and come before his honor or her honor. Which is why I admire what her honor has done. She has provided an instrument that is not to be seen as seminal work only, and I love that because it creates the precedent when you're creating, arguments for juxtapositioning. So it's not something to look back to say, this is what was, This is present continuous. So it has with it a sort of a dynamism that allows for us to take stock of where we came from. If you want to use history of words, the etymology, anthropology, pull the whole cultural dynamic that gave rise to the industrial court as we know it. The jurisprudence of natural justice, one of the most complicated of them all, because people sometimes call it kangaroo. But you know why? It is multivariate. And it's the multivariate nature is what eludes most. So again, how do you navigate? She took the time to assess the ecology. And as a diva or principle within the space, I love that word. A diva, let's say it together, a diva. One more time, a diva or principle within the state. To come into the space to assist those of us who are now pioneering into this unprecedented time to avoid making mistakes. So we don't have to come before his honor or her honor. So I can't help but express my gratitude for such a well-timed piece of literature that will help us to navigate and to sustain, because Trinidad and Tobago needs institutions like a strong, vibrant, independent industrial court, free of form or favor. And I must say it also needs the ECA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smith. We appreciate that, Your Honor. I hope you appreciated. So we now come to our closing remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, Your Honor, all our specially invited guests and speakers, special thanks to you for this Friday morning, for coming here to be part of this launch, second launch of Honor's book. And again, congratulations to you for the hosting of this lunch at our offices, and for the contributions that we have had all morning. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to all our directors who took the time, our members and other guests, and for everyone in the room, our media, our technicians at the back. Deepest thanks to all of you. We also wish to thank our staff members who have all come on board to make this event a reality today, for their willing participation in the execution of the event, and to that young lady who just came here, Yvonne, who also supported us behind the scenes. We would like now to invite Her Honor to the podium to make a presentation to our chairman, Mr. Keston Nanku.
I can't be me and not say anything. I think it is, it's such an obvious plug for the ECA that it will not go unnoticed. Diva or not.